Hello class, it's Miss Roberts here, and tonight I'm going to review the persuasive speech assignment. I have a short slideshow that's based off the text Art of Public Speaking by Lucas, and if I use a different text, I will have a separate video for that particular text. But I do use similar outline structures, so I'm going to review the outline structure and the instructions for the persuasive speech assignment. Now, keep in mind that the persuasive speech will be structured a little differently than the informative speeches we had in the past. So pay attention to not only the Monroe Motivate Secret structure, but also being mindful of the structure, how it matches the structure of the outline. Make sure you have the headings when you're turning it in. And if you're an online class that does asynchronous delivery through YouTube, then make sure to have the link on your outline. So let's begin. Let me go over here. All right. So to do persuasive speaking, you're going to combine several elements of speech. Throughout the semester, we have learned how to perform a speech. We've learned how to organize that said speech, incorporate and conduct research, and make sure that we combine all these elements, use visual aids to create an entire presentation. Now you're going to take all the things that you learned and apply it to persuasion. So not only are you giving information like you did for the informative speech, but you're also trying to use that information to persuade others to either change their course of thinking or change an action. So I had to adjust something really quickly. Okay, so what is persuasion? It is the process of creating, reinforcing, or changing people's beliefs or actions. This is where you become the advocate. So instead of becoming a lecturer or a teacher, as with the informative speech, you're trying to persuade others to change their course of actions or their thinking. So if you think back to the analyzing audience chapter, that's where finding a target audience is very important. I want you to think about your favorite commercial. Just think about it for a moment. Some of my favorite commercials involved humor or involved the products that I like. For example, I really like those Super Bowl Doritos commercials. Those are always really nice. The State Farm commercials, especially with the one where the guy is talking to the State Farm man at 4 o'clock in the morning and the wife was really suspicious. Those are just some of the commercials that pop into mind. Now think about the commercials that popped into your mind. Did they involve humor? Were they happy? Were they sad? Did they remind you of childhood and nostalgia? Did they evoke a sense of pride? Do you really like the brand of the product? No matter what you said, or no matter what the reasoning is, I also want you to step back and think about, okay, who was the target audience? Were they targeting you specifically? Let me explain. So in marketing, there is something called a target audience. So because there are very few products that can be marketed towards everyone at the same time, you have to figure out who would you target? Who do you think will most benefit and most connect with your product? So sometimes using devices such as humor or research or powerful emotions such as sadness or happiness can connect with the audience experience, which translates into buying products. So why am I talking about this now? Because like the advertiser, you are figuring out, okay, I have this speech, I have my topic, so how will I craft my speech to a specific audience and who will be more likely to go towards my way? And that brings us to the degrees of persuasion. Notice that there are many different positions a person can take. Say, for example, an election, or where you have to vote for either a person, an ideal, or a proposition. You might ask 10 people what they think about a certain issue on the ballot, and you might get 10 different responses because depending on how close the issue is to them, how close the issue to their values or morals or actions, or how it affects them, they may be either strongly opposed, strongly in favor of, completely neutral, and everything in between on a certain issue. So, for example, say if you want the audience to be in favor of your proposition, and if some audience members are over here, do you think that one speech can bring them all the way back over here? Well, if you answered no, then you're more than likely right. Now, for instance, there might be some instances where a message or an event might completely change the person's worldview. It's not impossible, but the probability that you can convert an audience member who's over here all the way over here in one speech is unlikely. However, you might push them over here or over here. Maybe they become neutral, or maybe even over here. But you might also influence them to look up the issue on their own, talk to their peers, and then later on, they can go towards your way of thinking or go towards the action that you want them to go on. So you're planting that seed of change in your speech. Another thing that, another aspect of public speaking that we talked about before was credibility and trust within the audience. So, for example, I guess I can absorb information from a person that I don't trust as much, but a person I don't trust, I won't follow their direction. So, creating trust and credibility with your audience is really important. I can hear out someone that I don't necessarily like or respect if they're giving me information, and maybe I'll be able or be willing to look it up on my own. But if I don't trust someone and they want me to change my mind, or they want me to change a course of action that I've been doing all along, or that can affect my life, then the trust factor is really important. I wouldn't want to take advice from someone I didn't trust. That being said, as a speaker, how can you gain trust with the audience? Some speakers gain that trust immediately. When they do, this is called initial credibility. It's established before speaking. So, for example, gain the trust of a teacher because you trusted other teachers. So you might be more likely to trust teachers in your other courses. So you might be more willing to trust celebrities, others in your family, people with a title, someone in your church or religious organization. So those with either power or those who are in trusted positions or those figures who are trusted in your life, if they tell you something, they have that established credibility. You already have that trust built into that relationship. So if it's a speaker who can establish themselves, come from a prestigious organization or celebrity, or has a trusted position, say for instance like a doctor, then that credibility is there right from the get-go. But what if you don't have that? You can also gain that trust during the actual speech. So by putting the evidence together, being clear, being passionate about your subject, and making that connection with the audience, that trust and that credibility is gained throughout the presentation. Now, you can also gain it towards the end of the speech. So, for instance, if you have a skeptical audience, but as the speech progresses, they gain that trust and gain those new ideas, then that credibility might be gained at the very end in the speech's entirety. Or they may go home later, think about it, and say, that speaker has some really good ideas. So that credibility will be established at the end. Some ways to establish that credibility is to explain confidence. For instance, why should we trust you? So, for example, you can use narrative and personal experiences to talk about your connection with the topic. You can also use outside research from credible sources, which you've done thus far, to gain competence and connection with the audience. Establishing common ground, this is what we've done. So, for example, in your informative speech, in the introduction, you're required to talk about why is the topic important to the audience, or why is it relevant to their experience. So definitely practice that in the creation of your persuasive speech. But finally, you want to explain clearly with conviction. For instance, if I'm trying to say, hey, don't use disposable water bottles, but instead, I want you to use reusable water bottles, such as this one. Would you be convinced if I delivered it like this? Hello, everybody. My name is Sabrina, and today I'm going to talk about why you should use reusable water bottles. Reusable water bottles are better for the environment, and they don't pollute our oceans or our land. So do what you can and use the reusable water bottle. Okay, so I made a couple of good points. Okay, they won't pollute the land. Reusable water bottles are good, but could you get past the monotone? Maybe I can change your mind. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sabrina Roberts, and today I want to talk about why you should switch to reusable water bottles, such as this one. This one's pretty inexpensive, $20 from Target, but it's not just the expense that is beneficial that will make water bottles beneficial to your life, but you can also do your part and reduce pollution by switching to reusable water bottles, reducing your plastic waste, or if you have to use reusable water bottles, make sure to recycle it. Okay, I started just a little bit, but I wanted to illustrate that delivery matters. Your ears perked up a little bit, like, oh, what is this? It's a brand new water bottle? So be enthusiastic about the topic and speak clearly with conviction. Make sure that you understand your topic and make sure that you're bringing in good organization, good information, and combine those things together for credibility. Okay, gotta move myself up a little bit. So when figuring out what types of speeches you want to do, or your topic of your speeches, you can also begin with the different types of persuasive speeches. For example, there are questions of fact. So you're talking about if the topic is true or false. For example, does global warming or climate change exist or not? Does Bigfoot exist or not? Do aliens exist or not? Those are questions of fact. Questions of value examines if an argument is worthy, right, or moral. For example, should we have capital punishment laws on the books? Should we delete student debt or get rid of student debt? What are some of the moral questions we have about climate change? Is it a moral imperative to resolve climate change for the next generation? Those are some examples of questions of value. Next up, we have questions of policy. So you're going to examine if an action should be taken or not taken. For example, should there be tax cuts, or should we increase taxes on the rich? Or should we have free parking on campus for everyone? With questions of policy, it's more organizational or legal, but you're talking about, okay, what is the rules? Should we change them or should we keep them? Now, keep in mind that some topics can overlap into two or even all three. Or all three categories. So if you're thinking about which topics to choose, you can use the technique that we use for the informative speech. Talk about the topics that you know about. Think about the topics that you don't know about as well, but you would like to know about. Or you can do the different types of speeches. What questions of fact, value, or policy do you want to explore? Now, with the previous brainstorming technique, evaluating which topics you know, which topics that you want to know more about, please keep in mind it's going to be a little bit more narrow than the last time, because we're not just talking about topics in general, we're talking about topics that deal with policy or societal issues. So it's going to be a little bit more narrow than the last time. So last but certainly not least, let me see if I can just go, let me go in here. All right. Perfect fit. Okay. So finally, we're going to focus on the Moreau's motivated sequence. The Moreau's motivated sequence will be the structure in which we will do our persuasive speeches. And there are 5 steps. Now, the first step is to gain attention of your audience. We've been doing that the entire time. Use some of the techniques such as questions, quotes, narratives, and so on. Next up, we have the need. Now, the need is synonymous with describing the problem. But you're not just going to describe the problem, you're going to describe the problem in a little bit more detail, talk about pros and cons, and all those things. I'm going to show you the outline in a little bit. But because you create a sense of urgency with describing the problem, you're going to satisfy that sense of urgency with stating the solution. So the need is synonymous with stating the problem, and satisfaction is synonymous with solution. Now, the visualization section will be, or is, a practice with your narrative. So, for example, you can do the visualization section in one of 3 ways. You can talk about the good things that will happen if we implement your solution, the bad things that will happen if we don't implement your solution, or you would do both. The visualization is a hypothetical situation or hypothetical narrative. And oftentimes you'll begin this section by saying, what if, or imagine, picture this. And those are great transitions for that particular section. Last but certainly not least, we have the action. Now, in other speeches, the conclusion was just used as a recap and to close out. So you will close out. However, unlike the other speeches, the conclusion or the action section is the most important part, because all these steps, the intention, need, satisfaction, and visualization steps, are all to get your audience to act. So when we talk about action, what do I mean? Tell the audience what to do. Do you want them to sign a petition? Do you want them to buy something, boycott something, do something? Now, when we talk about do something, here are some examples. You might have heard earlier some rushing around. Those are just my cats. That's going to make sense in a minute because I got one of my cats, from the shelter. So, many of you like animals, right? I'm pretty sure you do. Some people don't. That's okay. But for those who do, what if I posted a link after this video so you can donate $100 to my local shelter? $100. Local shelter. For the animals. Come on. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Is Miss Roberts hitting us up for money on YouTube right now? She's turned into a full YouTuber. Not quite. Don't worry, I will never take your money. However, if you scoffed at $100 like, hey, it's kind of cool and all, but I don't have $100 to give you, that's fine. I don't have $100 to give myself. But think about it like this. What if I asked for $5? A dollar. Donate pet food or pet beds. My point is, you want to make sure that the action that you're telling your audience is feasible. You don't want to ask for something grandiose. Well, maybe let me put that back a little bit. If you do have the audience to ask like for $1,000 for, then that's different. But just know your audience. That's why we talk about audience analysis. Because I talk to college students, I think asking each of my students for $100 for the organization may be too exorbitant. I know they will like it, but it'll be too exorbitant. But if I ask for $5, a dollar, donating blankets or donating cat beds or dog beds or what have you, will be a more reasonable request. So if you do, when you decide to figure out, okay, what action am I going to tell my audience, want to make sure that it's doable and specific. So is it feasible for the audience to do? And are you being specific in what you want them to do? So just to recap with the Monroe's motivated sequence, first you're going to gain the audience's attention. Then you're going to create a sense of urgency with stating the problem and talk about why the issue is a problem. Satisfy that need, that sense of urgency with the satisfaction section. That is the solution. Use your narrative skills. Give a hypothetical example of the good things that can happen if we implement a solution, the bad things that'll happen if we don't implement a solution, or both. And last but certainly not least, that action. What do you want the audience to do? So before I let you go, so this is on the slide. Let me go ahead and so what I want to show you before I let you go tonight is I want to show you the outline that I use. So I've got to move myself over a little bit. Maybe bump it up a little bit. All right. So this is for my Cal State class, but if you're at another institution, just go ahead and change the class, change the date. For those whom I require to create a YouTube video, you're going to place it up here. For schools that will meet synchronously through Zoom, then please disregard this section right here. So those are some of the differences. Everything else is identical. So with this outline, make sure to keep the headings. Like I mentioned in the informative speech video, I need these headings to know exactly where you are in the speech. So for example, you can cut out this section, leave the numbers, and put those in there. So there are a lot of headings, but you can totally make it simple. Take out my instructions and put them in there. Put your information in there and keep my headings. So you don't want to remove those headings. All right. So you have your intention getter up here. And you have your problem thesis statement. We've done thesis statements before. So it's pretty much you're stating what is the problem. What are you going to talk about? Then you have the B section. So you're just going to give a brief overview of what you're going to talk about, that brief introduction. Next, you're going to describe the need. So you can use a combination of these three. You don't have to use all of them because remember, my class is based on time versus length of the outline. I do say write about a page and a half, but if you have time to do all three, that's fine. Some of the ways you can describe the problem in more detail is to present the stats, facts, and testimonies about the seriousness of the problem, talk about the cause and effects of the problem, and connect to or make a connection with how the problem affects them. If you've taken English class before, I know I'm making a lot of references, but there's a lot of parallels there. And if you've completed or done an argumentative essay, you may have been asked to present the other side or the opposing viewpoint. So this is similar to that request. So you're going to talk about any objections to the problem. And if you can recall the spectrum of agreement with the topic that I showed earlier, this is addressing some of the opposing viewpoints that might be in your audience. So when the audience hears, like, oh, okay, you understand my side, even though you're not advocating for it, it kind of helps reel them in a little bit, and they might hear you a little bit more, or might be open to what you're talking about a little bit more. So you're going to meet those objections right here and just briefly describe any objections that might be brought up with your presentation of the problem. Next, we have the solution thesis statement. So pretty much in one sentence, what is your solution? Okay, how are you going to solve this issue? You're going to explain a little bit more detail. Now you can use visual aids. You don't have, if you're doing this via video, you don't have to just use all this editing software to like put them in there or anything like that. You can have a picture or an object and that'll suffice. And you can use visual aids any point of your speech. You also want to talk about where this has worked before. Now, you have to have at least 3 outside sources. In your research, you want to talk about or compare to where has the solution worked before. So, for instance, if you are talking about changing a state law, so you want to change a law in California, you can compare it to another state. If you want to change a federal law or U.S. law, you can think about where have they implemented the law in another country. If you want to change a policy on your campus, then think about another school or another university or college that has implemented your solution. See what I'm saying? So compare apples, oranges, and oranges. Then again, you're going to meet those objections. So think about one reason that someone might not like your solution, even though they might agree that it's a problem. Meet those objections and see, hey, what are some of the drawbacks to the solution? Next up, you have visualizing the results. So I'm pretty sure everybody sees this here. Why am I taking the time to highlight that section? Because more often than not, people cut out that section for some reason. It happens every semester, every class, every time. And I don't understand why. So I always stop and say, do you see the visualizing results there? Do you see them there? I see it. You see it. But then it disappears when I get the outline. I want you to get all your points. You've been working really hard. But if you take out the section, I can't give you all your points. So make sure you have the visualization section, or all the sections for that matter, in your outline. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Anywho, so here you're going to, like I said before, project the picture. You can use the transitions. Imagine, picture this. Let's visualize. To transition into the visualization section, and you're going to talk about the good things that can happen if we implement a solution, the bad things that can happen if we don't implement solution, or you can present both. Okay, so make sure you have that narrative, that hypothetical narrative in there. Last but certainly not least, call to action. So what do you want us to do? Donate, boycott, sign a petition. Do you want us to switch products, switch to the water bottle? What do you want us to do? How do we do it? So if you want, excuse me, if you want to use a visual, for example, some of the things that we do in the face-to-face classes, you can either point us to the right direction of a online petition, just for example, or you can create a mock petition that you print out and show it to us, right? So those are some go-arounds we can do for the online space. However, you can use a visual for the end too, or two birds, one stone, direct us to a website. And you can even show us the website a little bit too, if you like. So say if you have your phone or your tablet, you can show us what website to go on. So make sure it's doable and it's specific. And of course, your concluding statement, just like we've been doing the whole time. Okay, so that's a brief synopsis of the persuasive speech, the morose motivated sequence, and the outline. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll be contacting you guys soon for any updates. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and have a wonderful evening. Bye.